Everyone, just doing a quick video with you today all about mindfulness. This is something we've heard a lot about recently. Mindfulness is often talked about in the media and it's quite a buzzword at the moment, but for a lot of us we don't actually know what it is. So mindfulness can be a really effective and useful tool to making our well-being better. So it works by focusing on being in the present moment. So that's in a nutshell what mindfulness is. It's being aware of the very present moment, what's happening right now, being aware of the sensations of your senses and that around you. And it's so easy to get rushed along with the automaticness of life. And because we're very established thinkers now as humans, we often get into quite automatic thinking habits. So for example, driving along in the car, we're not looking and thinking about what we're doing with our steering wheel, for instance, or what's on the radio often a lot of the time, because we're thinking and processing all the time through that. So we can think about what we're going to make for tea at that time. We can think about what we're going into at work on the way in, what's going to happen when we get there. We can think about all manners of our day or what's previously gone before us as well. What's happened yesterday, for instance, how our colleagues might react to something. All of that brain processing becomes very automatic. We're incredibly clever creatures. And our brains are incredibly clever. So reconnecting with the present moment can be really helpful and useful in slowing us down a little bit, which is really important for our mental health. So paying more attention to the present moment, to own thoughts and feelings and to the world around you can absolutely improve our well-being. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to do that on the next slides. So practicing how to be mindful. So one of the little things that we can weave in and practice being mindful about is by adding it to a routine that we're already doing. So for instance, getting up in the morning before work, for example, going to shower, going to brush our teeth, or going to get dressed in the morning, or even having our morning cup of coffee or cup of tea or breakfast. So really zoning in and noticing one of those things in a little bit more detail than we would perhaps automatically do in our day-to-day life. So for instance, the shower. So instead of just whilst we're in the shower thinking about what we're going to do with the rest of our day, or what we're going to have for tea tonight, so similar to the car situation, we often think automatically about lots of different things all at the same time. So really slowing that down and focusing on the very present minute details that take up our shower time. So for example, the feel of the water on your skin, or really notice the texture of what the water feels like, the splash against your body of the water, really slowing it down and thinking, how do I feel right now? And noticing what thought process you perhaps have. So just noticing them, imagine them they're sitting on a cloud almost and pass you by, rather than getting into that automatic pattern of thinking. So really focusing on our senses, our thought patterns, how we're feeling in our body, and bringing it very present. So the other things that we can do and adding in part of our daily routine could be, for example, tasting a different sort of food. So if at breakfast time, for instance, we really slow it down and we think, actually, really, what does that breakfast taste like? What textures am I experiencing in my mouth? What does it feel like? How do I feel at the moment eating this? And really kind of taking note of those tiny little details can give us a lot more perspective on gratitude as well. So being grateful for those tiny moments, because I've put in here at the top perhaps the feel of your child's hand in yours. Kind of, does it feel soft? Does it feel warm? And really paying attention to those details and reminding us how grateful we are for those tiny little things. And that's where the improvement on well-being comes from, and the practice of that. So I've put down here as well, trying something new, because we are creatures of habit, us humans. And how many times I've gone into my office at work and sat in exactly the same chair in exactly the same spot next to exactly the same colleagues. And actually I started practicing being a bit more mindful with that little nuance recently, and changing where I sit, and actually that threw up a lot more kind of perspective of where I sat in the office. So my view was different, I was looking at a different window, and I was talking to different colleagues and getting to know them a little bit more as well, which, you know, sometimes can feel like a chore at times if we're not in the right zone or not in the right mood. But tiny little changes in your routine can be really, really helpful and can give us a new perspective on life and things being slightly different and things being slightly brighter at times. Similarly, like try something new for lunch, because how often did I have a kind of ham salad sandwich every day? Trying something a little bit new, so having a tuna, for example, or cheese salad for, or even throw it out there and try a different place and go out to eat. Those little things make a difference. They throw us a bit of difference and a bit more fun into our life if we're very stuck in a rut with it. And mindfulness isn't about making thoughts go away. So that's really, really important to be clear. So a lot of people get that wrong when we're thinking about mindfulness. It's not about changing our thoughts and making them go away and emptying our minds. It's about watching our thoughts and taking notice of them. And similarly with our emotion, why is that emotion showed up? Why are those thought processes happening for me right now? What's my brain trying to tell me? What's emotion being communicated to me, and why is that there? That is being mindful, and that practice of doing that is really, really useful, because it sometimes distances us as well from really, really difficult thought processes. So the practice of being mindful and watching our thought patterns, if we're having difficult thought patterns and intrusive thoughts, for instance, that distances us a little bit from them and can be useful to practice that. Equally, being able to name an emotion and a feeling, and this is what we talk about with all children at Bridge the Gap, kind of the ability to name emotions and be emotionally literate is really, really useful, because the more that we can establish and accept and manage and validate what our emotion is and understand what it's trying to communicate to us, the more that we can work through it, we can accept it and commit to what we're going to do with the rest of our day and let that emotion pass through us with coping strategies such as mindfulness. So just finally, here's a sheet about, or a presentation slide, all about how we can practice being mindful. So as well as the things that I've already talked about, so changes to little bits of our routine or practicing parts of our routine in a more mindful way, we can practice any of these things. So spending time with nature, absolutely love it. Walking barefoot on the grass, that's grounding, but it's also being mindful. So grounding and mindfulness, there's a slight difference between those things. And grounding is making reconnections with nature, for instance, or reconnections with our senses. Mindfulness is about being present in the moment, being aware of what our emotions are and our thought processes are, and watching them perhaps pass by, for instance, and not getting caught up in that way of negative thinking sometimes that we can do. So breathing exercises, really, really important, and a good way of being mindful. So being mindful whilst we're breathing, it's hard not to be mindful whilst you're breathing, because you're thinking about that breathing process rather than kind of getting caught up in those automatic thinking habits that we get into. So planting things outside, cooking, taking the dog for a walk, taking a bath, chatting with friends and listening to them as well, and being really mindful about what you're listening to, what the sound of their voice is like, what are they telling you, what are they trying to communicate, and people in your household as well, obviously at the current time. Lots and lots of ways to practice mindfulness, but have a go at it. Let us know at Bridge the Gap how you get on with it, and if you want more about mindfulness, we can give you more about mindfulness, so do get in touch.